You think he's joking?
I did.
He's actually not joking. I was gonna bring the bag in, and I will do that actually. When we get to commercial break, I'll come back and we'll just have your bag of clothes, and we can go through your clothes and just get the sense of fashion that Mr. X has.
Yeah, why not? Why not?
Because we can. On today's show, we are updating you guys on all things esports from the weekend. Obviously, myself and Matt were in New York City. We were covering all of the Call of Duty stuff, the 2K, the 5K, had some roster moves as well. But more importantly, XGames was this weekend, and Counter-Strike Global Offensive. Dude, it's been a long day, okay? I was scared. I thought I was going to get turned into a snowman. Did you see me when I walked in the office? I was white. I thought I was going to turn into a snowman. But Counter-Strike Global Offensive was at the XGames, and we're lucky enough to have Dust Murray join us, our veteran Counter-Strike person. He's going to give us all the knowledge from CSGO.
He's the knowledge guy for Counter-Strike.
Yeah, how are you doing today, Dust?
I'm doing pretty good. It's really cold here too. It's like 50 degrees, so I don't know how.
50's cold for you?
All right, I'm English.
Get Dustin out of here.
Dude,
I'll break it down. I'll break down Counter-Strike.
What's 50 degrees in centigrade?
I don't know.
What's that?
What's 50 in centigrade? Celsius. I'm English. I use like 0 degrees.
You guys use stuff that's completely fake.
Maybe in the 20s. I have no idea.
20s? That's not. It feels like minus 10 degrees.
It was a poorly received, sarcastic comment. Sorry.
Anything outside of Eastern Standard Time doesn't exist. It's fake time.
Okay.
And anything that we don't use to like measure stuff, that stuff is just all made up.
Okay.
So,
well,
anyway.
I'm glad we covered that straight off the bat. But Dust, first question I have to ask you. Obviously, X Games started off with esports in the summer X Games last year. Call of Duty was the first gaming video game to be played at the X Games. Now it was Counter-Strike at Aspen. How was that received by the competitive Counter-Strike community?
This is probably the most positive response I've ever seen to an event from the CSGO community, if I'm 100% honest. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, the CSGO scene has always been very open-armed towards big events, especially like all these $250,000 majors that we've had thrown by, you know, some of the different organizations from Europe, such as like ESL and DreamHack. Like, people have always received those very well, just due to like the quality of the production, the commentary, the level of competition. Obviously, the number of great teams and players that attend those events. Those events have always been received very well, but North American events, there haven't really been many, if we're honest, as far as like big major events. This is probably the biggest event North America has ever seen on its soil when it comes to Counter-Strike. And I mean, the CSGO subreddit is usually like a pretty good thermometer on like trying to gauge like the temperature of the community when it comes to whether they're warm or cold towards something. And ever since the MLG kicked off on Friday and throughout the weekend, even up until today, like the entire front page is just covered with praise about MLG and X Games. So a lot of people really enjoyed the event. There wasn't very many negative things that people said about it. It was a really, really warm welcome, and people are hoping that MLG will get to host North America's first major. So I mean, there's a lot of people that are behind MLG right now. MLG really did grab the attention of the community with this event. There's no question about it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that all sounds awesome. So obviously, new to CS:GO, I watched a lot of it over the weekend. It was awesome.
It was funny. We shouldn't say this, but we have 2 screens in the studio. We were casting card on the left. We had the X Games on the monitor on the right hand side.
Right. So, Dustin, coming into the event, who was, your kind of favorite going in? Did the finals kind of end up where you thought it would be?
Not really. I mean, coming into the event, Fnatic and LDLC were definitely considered the 2 best teams in the world. Most people thought Fnatic was the clear #1, mostly just because they had been winning everything in recent times, especially the last, 6 or so months of 2014. They were just absolutely dominant. They were taking first place at the biggest events of CSGO, such as Face City, SWC, Fragbite Masters. They were just winning everything. And then you had LDLC, who was like always coming second place to Fnatic at some of these events, like ESWC, like Fragbite Masters. So that they were just kind of neck and neck, really, in the community's eyes, as like who was the true #1, who was the true #2. So those were definitely the 2 favorites coming into the event. So that's basically the 2 teams that we're really looking at to do well. And the biggest thing, of course, was at the end of the year, the very end of the year. So the last 2 events that we had before X Games was actually the ESEA LAN in Dallas, Texas, that took place towards the end of the year. And that was an event that Fnatic, took first place in to end the year. But of course, the biggest tournament that we were looking back at was DreamHack Winter in 2014, which is the last 250K major that we've had, and that was the event that LDLC actually finally took first place. So that was really awesome for them. So those were definitely the two front runners coming into the event. There's no question about that. So I guess the point would be there's no surprise that LDLC made it to the grand final of the event. Looking at some of the other teams, I think NIP, of course, was a team that a lot of people had their eyes on. This is the most recognizable brand from Counter-Strike Global Offensive. They, in the entire history of CSGO, has certainly been probably the most dominant team if you go all the way through the entirety of the game. In recent times, they've had a bit of a drop-off, but...
Why do you think that is?
Why did they have a drop-off?
Yeah. Why would you say they've had a drop-off?
Tough to really say, I guess. I mean, part of it, I think, just is other teams got really good. Back when NIP was playing CSGO and dominating the scene, there was still some of the top 1.6 organizations and stuff weren't really so, open to CSGO quite yet.
Oh, okay.
There was a very slow transition process that took place before some of these, top 1.6 players and teams really transitioned to CSGO. So that accounts for it quite a lot. I don't know. I mean, I guess maybe at some point NIP just got figured out. They've kept a very similar play style and a very similar strategy throughout most of their history. And I think it maybe eventually just got stale. People kind of figured it out, kind of knew how NIP was going to play. And in almost every map, you could kind of read them. So NIP really just had to rely on hitting their shots and good chemistry and good teamwork and clutch situations, like those small number situations, like those 2v2s and 3v3s, just relying on excellent chemistry and teamwork to win out rounds like that. But when it came to straight executions and things like that, I think just some other teams really caught up. Not only that, but people also said that there was kind of a skill disparity. People like Forrest, who used to be, one of the best players from 1.6, if not the best. It's arguable whether it was him or Neo from 1.6 that was the best player ever of Counter-Strike 1.6. But he just kind of dropped off. He was really inconsistent. He wasn't really having the big games every game anymore. People used to always criticize Fiflaren as not having quite as much skill as the rest of the team when it came to fragging. And I guess NIP eventually agreed the change was needed because they got rid of Fiflaren before DreamHack Winter. He retired rather, and they picked up Michael, who was their new dedicated opper.
That guy's pretty good.
Yeah, because I mean,
Matt became an instant fan.
Yeah,
he saw a couple of games.
One,
and Matt was like, "Yo."
He has an awesome name. Two, he doesn't miss.
That's
I became a fan.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the other big things about NIP is, like, they didn't really have a dedicated opera in the sense that Fiflaren was supposed to be the dedicated opera, but it got to a point where he seemed uncomfortable with it, and so Forrest would really kind of step in and use it quite a lot. And now you see Forrest kind of freed up to go back to being more of a rifler, except when they want to run like a double op setup, in which case they'll bring Forrest back in. But Michael Laley being the dedicated op frees up Forrest to go back to what he's most known for in CSGO, which is with the rifle. So that was part of it too. But I guess the big conclusion to all of this is that they ended the year with a bang, so to speak.
Right.
You know, at DreamHack Winter 14, they were able to make it to the grand final. And though they did lose to LDLC at the grand final, they still were able to make it way further than anyone anticipated, because prior to this event, you know, this team was like always a top 4 team throughout the entirety of CSGO for the most part. But like the last, I don't know, 6 to 8 months of 2014, they were even getting to a point where they couldn't even qualify for some lands. Like they didn't qualify for the Face at Milan event. You know, there's just some events they didn't even qualify for. So it was really looking grim. And a lot of people thought that, you know, NIP was probably going to place like 5th through 8th or something like that at DreamHack Winter based on how they had competing and the fact that no one knew how good Michael Laley was going to be for them. And, you know, they shocked everyone by you know, taking 2nd place.
How much of a risk do you reckon it was picking him up?
I think a change had to be made as far as who they could have gotten. I mean, who really knows? I'm sure that some people suggested that there were some people from Fnatic that might have been a good fit for NIP, like a Olaf or something like that. But it's kind of hard for Fnatic to make a change or lose a player when they were just dominating everything. Yeah, like it'd be really hard to poach a player from that team. And outside of those 2 teams from Sweden, I mean, there's some other names out there. But I think Michael Laley was probably the best option they had that was like probable to get, so to speak. So I think it was a necessary risk, but it wasn't really that big of a risk because people knew Michael Laley would be pretty good.
Awesome. Well, going into the X Games, of course, I myself and Puckett did the group draw.
Yeah.
And we drew out Group A, and of course that was NIP, Cloud9, Kaboom, and Dignitas. And we had a couple people on the show at the time. I believe Thorin was on there, and he was like, "Oh, okay, interesting little pool you got there." He kind of expected NIP to come out favorites of that group. When you saw that group, what were your thoughts, Dust?
I think the trend of the whole tournament was like, okay, you have a GPS, right? And you set in the destination that you want to go to. So like, you know what the destination's going to be. But like, let's say like you mess up and you take a wrong turn, so the GPS has to like reroute you. So it's like rerouting or whatever, right?
I like where this is going.
So I guess the point of the whole group play that I was trying to get at is we arrived at the destination we thought we would get at as far as who would advance from the groups. But there was a lot of rerouting that took place, in the sense that a lot of things kind of happened in group play that we really didn't see coming, I guess you could say. Some of the group play matches definitely threw us for a loop, but we eventually did get to where we thought we would be. So I guess the point I would make then is, when you look at Group A, everyone thought that NIP and Dignitas would be the two teams to advance. Probably NIP number 1, Dignitas number 2, if you were to predict like how the seeding would actually go.
Right.
And I think most people thought that Cloud9 would, I guess, place like 3rd in the group, maybe beat Kaboom, maybe have a chance at a Dignitas, but probably weren't going to advance is the point. And I think most people just kind of completely disregarded Kaboom, just simply because we don't get to see Brazilian Counter-Strike much often. I think they've been at a couple of ESWC events and maybe one of the majors out of the 4 that we've had thus far. So they're really kind of like an isolated community that doesn't really get to compete very much. And I think Fallen even made this comment in an interview that like he was just, he was so happy that there was an event like this that a Brazilian team could actually make it out to. And they're also going to be at ClutchCon this weekend. So it's really awesome. Like we're trying to make this game truly global is really the goal. And it was really cool to see some, Brazilian participation in this event. So that's kind of what we thought was going to happen in the group, at least. But like I said, things kind of did some rerouting along the way.
No real surprises in Group A. And then we look at Group B: Fnatic, LDLC, Liquid, and CLG. What were your thoughts immediately when that group was drawn? Because I mean, Forum was like, oh, okay, all right, that's a pretty tight group right there.
Yeah, Fnatic and LDLC were definitely the two teams favorited to advance. There's no question about that. I mean, they're the top 2 teams in the world coming in. Fnatic, the clear number 1, LDLC, the clear number 2. So those 2 teams were definitely predicted to come out of the group. Liquid was like a last-minute replacement for the XI by Power, so they didn't even know they were attending the event until Wednesday, I think it was. So 2 days before the event is when they found out they were going, and they had to like quickly rush to get there, basically. So no one really knew what Liquid was. I don't think there was really any high hopes for Liquid, just because it was such last minute for them to go, and they had just made some roster changes, and they didn't really have much of a chance to even kind of practice or prep with their new roster to really be prepared for an event like this. So most people didn't really see that coming. And then CLG was the big North American team that probably had, besides XI by Power, which is like, has a lot of hype around them and those players. CLG was probably next in line as far as like the hype train, because they had been performing so well online recently. They shocked everyone by coming out of the Aspen qualifier, the first one, by beating teams like XI by Power, like Torqued, just like clear dominance in the online play, and even some of the Faceit Cups they played in, they just looked really good. And so I think there was a lot of hype surrounding this team, and they delivered when the event started off. So this was actually probably one of the crazier groups. I mean, Group A was crazy in the sense that Kaboom beat Cloud9. No one ever saw that coming. So that was like that was the big shocker from Group A. But then it was also a big shocker that C9 recovered from that and beat NIP on Nuke. That was pretty crazy too, but it wound up not mattering. They still didn't advance. So really the big game there was NIP versus Dignitas, and that was an overtime game. So that was actually like a pretty crazy game. So I would recommend, like, if you want to go back and look at some of these VODs, watch NIP versus Dignitas on Dust 2 in Group A. That was actually a pretty good match to watch. But Group B was definitely the biggest shocker, and where CLG, to open the tournament, beat LDLC on Dust 2, like probably their best map, which is CLG's best map too. But when you stack like the number 2 team in the world's best map against like kind of obscure team that isn't really in the world rankings, their best map, don't really expect it to come out this way with CLG winning 16-14. That game was insane. I guess big shout outs go to Peter, who just played an outstanding game. I think he dropped over 30 frags that game with the op. It was just outstanding, and everyone really pitched in, obviously. Like, outside of him, the frag distribution was really tight, and they just played really good Counter-Strike, and it was amazing that they won. But unfortunately, that Cinderella story came to a quick end because they kind of got smashed by Fnatic and Liquid right afterwards. So the hype was way up there, but then they just dropped off after that CL.
They crashed. They went from 100 to 0 real quick.
They crashed pretty quick. But no, guys, we're gonna go to a quick commercial break, and then after this, we're gonna recap the semifinals and finals. We're gonna show you guys a few of the games that went on, a few of the close games that we picked out. So stay tuned. Semifinals and finals coming up next.